Good morning and welcome to this Cater.com live session on leadership with empathy and compassion. I'm Kathy Dybel, I'm Head of Marketing for Cater.com. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a packed hour to hour and a half, depending on how the conversation goes and the questions come in. And we'll be tackling all things leadership current to what we need right now. Perhaps you could argue that empathy and compassion are needed now more than at any other time within leadership. This is part of our Cater.com Leadership Collaborative series, and the idea of that collaborative is that we believe everyone has a responsibility for leadership. It's a choice, it's not a job title, so at any level you can contribute to positive leadership, whether you're in a senior position or making your way up. And when I look at the delegates on the call today, I can see that that's really represented a wide range of individuals within the sector. So we've got HR directors, we've got HR managers, managing directors, people and culture managers, we've got students on management programs, we've got graduate students, operations managers of all kinds. So thank you so much for joining us today. It's brilliant to have such a good cross-section with us. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the panel and ask them all to switch their cameras on so you can see everybody. So Jo, Teresa and Stella, please turn your camera on so everyone can see you. Okay, fantastic, excellent. So rather than me introduce you, you're more than capable of introducing yourself. So do you want to go into perhaps Teresa first, then Stella, then HR Jo, as I'm going to call you, and then Umbrella Jo to distinguish between you. So do introduce yourselves.
Hi, good morning all. My name is Teresa Chacon. I'm the Director of People and Development at Strand Palace and Trafalgar St. James.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Stella Amor, and I'm the Director of Human Resources at the Royal Garden Hotel.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Jo Meredith, and I'm self-employed HR and L&D Consultant.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Jo Simovic, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Umbrella Trading and Apprenticeship Provider in the hospitality industry.
Okay, thank you. So it goes without saying what an enormous amount of experience we have on the panel here today. I count myself out from that. These are highly experienced leaders in talent, in HR, in L&D, in training. So what a fantastic opportunity to share that insight together. And then as delegates, please do, as we're going through the session, add questions into the chat so that we can then come to those at the end of the session and get all of your questions answered. If we don't manage to answer all the questions, we will come back to you after this session. So do make this as interactive as it possibly can be. Okay, so we'll kick off with the discussion. The topics we're kind of looking at today are why leading with empathy and compassion is so important right now. So why should we even think about this topic? How the actions we take as leaders now will have a long-term and short-term impact on our brands, on obviously our people, the health of our businesses, and ultimately the health of the sector going forward. And then finally, we're very keen at the end of the webinar, of the live session, to ensure that you get guidance, action points, tips from our panel that you can take forward, not just in the future, but today, tomorrow. How can you take the first steps to improving your leadership with empathy and compassion, becoming a compassionate leader? So that's how we're going through the discussion today. But I'm going to start with a question for Umbrella Jo, and that's really to define compassionate and empathetic leadership. What does that mean exactly, Jo, and how is that distinct from other leadership styles?
I think it's a really difficult question because there's so many ways of defining empathy to start off, compassion to start off, and then leadership as a concept. But I would start with a definition that I would give that is a combination of various sort of aspects of all these three terms, and that's that it's a practice of understanding the experience of other people on a daily basis and choosing to do so consciously to then make meaningful decisions and relevant decisions for the business. So I want to really make it clear at the very start of this webinar that empathy is not a tick box activity. It's not a fluffy, touchy-feely concept. It's a real business concept, and it's an element where you define yourself as someone who has people acumen in addition to business acumen, and it's critical element of leadership skill set. So for me, if I'm defining the empathetic leadership, I'm talking about the ability to understand the feelings of the others. Yes. Some people say being able to put yourself in other people's shoes. Tricky situation, because even when you're in other people's shoes, you're still you. So it goes beyond that. It goes beyond of just putting yourself in that position. It goes to a point where you're understanding your limitations to understand someone's position as well, and looking at it from all angles. So that's the core of what empathy is. And then if we actually put that into the leadership concept, empathetic leadership is a concept of actually actively building relationships and using empathy to build relationship, to instill trust in your people that you're leading, or people that are managing you and leading you, that you're the person that can understand them and make the right choices based on that. So that's how I would define the empathetic leadership. Now, compassionate leadership goes a step further, in my opinion, and it's a tricky concept to use in everyday leadership, and I would say that not all of us are able all the time to show all the traits of compassionate leaders, because compassionate leaders have also desire to help, and also the way they do that is for the good of all. And that's the tricky bit about compassionate leadership. And we can argue that we can do that through collaboration concepts and everything else, but it is about understanding the limitations. So just summarize, I suppose, empathetic leaders are people who want to learn, who want to learn all the time and use that learning for the good of everyone. They're not heroes. They're not like transformational leaders that want to be put forward and to be the person that brings the change. They're quite happy to support their teams to bring the change. There are people who are seeking to make impact in other people's lives for the good of the team and the business. And I suppose there are people who seek to influence rather than impose authority, which is quite a tricky situation to be in at the times when everyone is seeking some sort of authority. So yeah, I hope that sort of makes a difference to how I perceive the two different types of leadership. And in the terms of the difference with others, yeah, it's the focus.
Yes, how is it distinct?
Yeah. Well, if you look at other types of leadership that you could have, in situational leadership, you focus on a particular situation and then you pick up the right tool to use. If you think about transactional leadership, you look at what the person wants and you exchange. So it's very much focused either on a situation or the followers. I don't like the term. Let's call it the team members. Okay. But when you look at the empathetic leadership, the focus is first on you. Because if you don't understand yourself, your limitations and your abilities as a leader, you are not able to understand others in turn. And I think the biggest difference is also ego status. It's a very difficult thing to be a genuinely compassionate and empathetic leader if you are not prepared to think of putting other people first and not prepared to be part of that team. So I think that's the biggest difference, that focus and that acknowledgement of the leader that they need to be reflective constantly.
Okay, that's really detailed and very useful. Obviously, it's an area of great expertise for you, Jo, isn't it? I think probably everyone well, good, and that's what we need. Everyone on the session is probably thinking, what kind of leader am I then, based upon what you've said, and what kind of leaders do I work with and have I worked with? So as we start to reflect on that, that's kind of part of the process here. Let's go to you, HR Jo Meredith. Why do you feel this is so important now? Why is it important for leaders now in hospitality to adopt a compassionate and approach?
So as leaders, we're facing sort of one of the most challenging times that we've ever faced. And whilst we're in the business of hospitality, so we're used to adapting and changing and being hospitable and accommodating. But we're going through such a big change at the moment. And if we talk about the change curve, we've gone through the denial, the shock, the anger. We're probably at that confusion stage now, which is a key stage to be able to get to sort of acceptance. So businesses are having to implement new guidelines, employees have been furloughed, they're coming back to work, and work looks very different to when they left back in March. So it's really important, that we listen to concerns that the people have. I'm sure a lot of businesses have probably carried out return to work questionnaires, and that might have helped to identify some concerns that employees would have. And if we don't address those concerns now, they're going to manifest, and it's going to impact the success of the business reopening. Sadly, within all industries, redundancies have been made, restructures. We hear about business closures all of the time. And, as Jo said earlier about, putting ourselves in other people's shoes, we have processes we have to follow when we're carrying out redundancies. There's statutory processes, ACAS guidelines, etc. But we need to humanise those processes, and we can add compassion and empathy in those processes. And if we don't, it's then going to have an impact on the reputation of the business and the employer brand. And I'm sure all of us on this webinar today, we've spent time going to careers fairs, going to schools, colleges, talking about what a wonderful industry the hospitality industry is. And if we don't deal with this right now, it's going to impact and undo all the hard work that we've done, and people won't want to come back into our industry. Because although we're quiet now, we're not recruiting, we will be busy, and we will be recruiting again in the future. So,
yes, yeah. So absolutely. So what I'm hearing there is, for the short term, with some of the challenging and often very difficult conversations that we're having to have, bringing people back into the business, or whether unfortunately having to let them go, compassion and empathy is so critical in how you treat them for that experience, but also long term too.
And then, teams will thrive if they can see that their managers have a genuine concern about them, generally concerned about their welfare. Those managers adopting that empathetic approach that Jo explained, they're the ones that are going to have teams that they're engaging with and inspiring. And at the end of the day, the teams, when redundancies happen within an organisation, there's something called the survival syndrome. People, who remain, might be worried about their jobs and their job security. It's about focusing that empathetic leadership on those employees, because they're going to be the key to the success of your business.
So treat people as people, I guess, yes. is in short. So coming back to you, Jo, briefly, Umbrella Jo, do you agree with what's just been said? I mean, do you agree that's why it matters? And importantly, is this measurable? Is this something that we can show a metric on?
I absolutely agree with what Jo Meredith said, because I think it is contextual at the moment. It's so relevant at the moment that I don't think that there has been a week that is better to do this webinar than this particular week. And we've had some discussions with our hospitality superheroes yesterday or the day before, and it's a number of general managers in the industry, Harry Murray, Sally Beck, and we were sitting in the same room and Zoom room, and discussing how important this concept is and how important being that kind of a leader is at the moment. Even when you're making the most difficult decision, even when you know that it is going to happen, the way we do it is so relevant. But I'm going to actually take us out of this context just for a second and highlight the importance of this particular concept out of this particular situation today. So, in the terms of return on the investment, there is a clear reasoning why we should be empathetic leaders and use these strategies in other times as well. There's connection to empathetic leadership and increase in sales that can be proven. So when the leaders change the way they see their customers' needs or guest needs, there is a clear impact on the way they deal with, for example, complaint handling or service recovery. There is a direct impact that can be shown through the studies in relation to, for example, the number of employment tribunal cases that people have, or the organizations have, that correlates to empathetic leadership. The number of hours that HR directors, HR managers, and HR specialists spend on performance-related issues, they go to grievances, that can be reduced as a result of empathetic leadership. And that's just top of the product development. There is case studies that talk about the impact of empathetic leadership on product development and actually pushing the right product to the market that is more creative, more relevant to the market and to the team that is designing it as a result of empathetic leadership. So I think what is really important to understand that there is a clear return on the investment to actually be an empathetic leader in the best of the times when we're talking about development and creativity. Now, I just want to go back to that brand equity that Jo was talking about just for a second. It is crucial at this time. It is crucial at this time for brands to understand that the choices and the choice of leadership that is taken at this point in time is going to make a difference to their brand equity, the way they're perceived by their guests, by all their stakeholders, but not just by their employees and the team members, but also their guests and their shareholders to a point. And the last point that I want to make about this, I suppose, is just thinking about the cost of empathy. The cost of empathy and taking that time to listen to your team member, taking that time to understand them, taking that time to choose the words and still, make the decision that needs to be made, but in a slightly and deliver it in a slightly different way, is a lot less than a cost of loss of reputation or the perception that will go that will be created in the industry and with that particular team member or with a guest in the long run. Something to really consider. Yeah.
Very powerful points, and I think perhaps for many it will be a bit of a light bulb moment to think being compassionate and empathetic as a leader is a strong business decision rather than something which you would do just to be nice or because it's the right thing to do. It's a strong business decision.
Can I add something to that? Sorry, Kathy. Culture element. Sorry. But culturally, we spend so much time and invest so much time building the culture of the organization. And then situations like this happen. And this is the time not to let the culture go, but to actually build on what you already have. And I'm not saying that means that we need to change the decisions that we're making, but the way we're implementing those decisions needs to go along with the values. And to mirror the Chancellor yesterday, it's not just about the economics, or economical impact, it's about the values as well. So think about the values of the decisions that you're making, and then empathetic leadership will be second nature or close enough.
So I know, thank you, Jo. I know we have two individuals on the panel here who've sat quietly but have lots to say on this topic. So let's start with you, Teresa, if I may. So what's your view on what's been said so far, and how would you define compassionate leadership from your own perspective? And what characterises it for you?
Yeah, I'm going to echo what Jo was saying at first. It's striking that balance, no? For me, at least, compassionate leadership is the balance between humility and ambition in the benefit of the greater good. It's not a weak leadership style at all. It is a conscious decision that we're going to achieve what we're going to achieve with humility, with ambition to better ourselves, to better the business. It's also a mindset, I think, and a habit. It's training yourself to think the first time you meet a person is to bring in the thought of how can I make you happy? So very similar to what we do with our guests. And we spend a lot of time training ourselves and our teams to deal with our guests. And the principle is exactly the same. I can't maybe give you the world, but I am sure to find a way to make you happy with what it is available to me. And I think if we go or approach any situation, the more basic ones to the more complex, with that idea, how can I make you happy? Or at this point in time, in this context, is how can I make the situation better? If we establish that mindset and we acquire that habit, we probably have better chance of balancing humility and ambition. Somehow compassionate leadership, or at least for me, the effect it has on me it tones down self-centered feelings, and the outcome is probably I achieve more influence rather than authority. So I think it's incredibly powerful, incredibly powerful. You have a more lasting effect, positive effect than other leadership styles, and definitely more than the authority leadership style. So the characteristics, I think it's already been said in one form or another, is feeling for the person, understanding the person and the situation, and a strong desire to wanting to help with whatever is available to you. So I think for me, that are the three main elements that we need to consider.
Okay, so thinking about that, obviously focused on understanding how can I help, how can I make the situation better. But I'm thinking that obviously listening to those individuals is a key part of that process. What are your thoughts around what listening means to you and how this is part of the process?
You see, to me,
yes, Teresa, sorry, I'm
listening, I think, is the starting point. You have to give yourself that time to truly understand the situation and the person, and how can you best help. So it is the beginning, and I think it goes a little bit even beyond active listening. I think it's listening with the purpose of understanding and with the purpose of wanting to make an impact. So you can't have any form of compassionate leadership if you do not start by listening first. There's so much we can learn from others, and by learning from others, we learn ourselves, we better prepare to offer that help, to find a solution, to create something that benefits everyone, like Jo was saying before, not just the individual, the team, the organization, and yourself.
Okay, thank you. Stella, let's come to you now. I'm going to ask you an additional question on the back of that, what's just been said. In terms of listening, for you personally, what is the next step from listening? What's the important bit to square the circle there? How do you go from listening and hearing to then taking the action?
I think it's important as leaders to genuinely listen and hear what people have to say, acknowledge. It's really important that, and Jo touched on this, and Teresa, we have goals to achieve as leaders. You know, we have a vision and objectives to achieve. If you're genuinely listening, that will impact the decisions you make on how you achieve those goals, you know, and it will make all the difference. Genuine listening and adapting your style to everybody is very important to make sure that you bring something with you to achieve a common goal. And that is kind of the element of listening. You have to establish those common goals. You might have direction for a company or a purpose, or in the current market, we know that we have to make tough decisions. Genuine listening is actually taking time to invest in your people. It's actually trying to get a win-win outcome. That can never be achieved unless you're genuinely listening. And this isn't the time to, you know, it's never too late to listen. But when we talk about genuinely listening, that could be part of your culture. It should be embedded as part of your leadership culture. If you are listening, not just today, but constantly as part of your culture in your organization, it won't be suddenly, oh, something's wrong here. They're actually listening to us now. Why now and not later? This should be an ongoing process of listening to employees. Their voice should matter, and they should genuinely feel like they have a voice. If they don't have a voice, then ultimately it's never a win-win. It's going to be more of a dictatorial approach of leadership style. Collaborative leadership means actually some of our best ideas, we know this in hospitality, some of our best ideas come from our employees. And this is a genuinely, it's not always what we have to do, how we do it. And I think listening isn't just the first step. Listening is a constant part of that employee journey. They should have a voice always, because when they have a voice, suddenly you also have a voice as a leader. When you have something to say, people will listen back to you. So I think it's the win-win that you're looking for when it comes to listening.
Okay, so you talk about win-win there. So there are many other wins out of this whole approach, aren't there? What are the benefits of compassionate leadership? How does it pay you back personally?
Well, I think personally as well as a leader, being a compassionate leader, Umbrella, Jo touched on this right on the beginning as well. You really have to understand your workforce. You have to understand what motivates them, what challenges they have, what matters to them. We know already through various surveys, employee opinion surveys, when we ask employees why you work in hospitality, why you do what you do, you'll find it isn't the pay and, it's the recognition, it's the give back. And you have to understand what motivates employees. And that will ultimately establish your culture in your organization. So I think as well, you have to have empathy and compassion to make sure that you adapt your style to people, to your approach. We know that we have challenges, not just now. We've got Brexit, people are forgetting about. We ongoingly have challenges, whether it's now, whether it's in the future. In order to make better informed decisions as leaders for our well-being of our business and our people today and for tomorrow, we have to make sure that all stakeholders have a voice and a seat at the table too. I think you also have to, as a leader, make sure that you constantly have all your business hats on. We know that we have to look at the financial elements or we won't have a financial well-being of our business. We know that we have to think of the guest, and we know already, but we know that one of those hats has to be our people culture, has to be the strategy for our people in our organization. It's no mistake, and I think Umbrella Jo touched on this as well, it's no mistake really that the top FTSE 100 performing companies actually have the highest engagement scores. That's not an accident. That didn't just happen. This is part of their people culture and their strategy to say, right, how can we actually outperform our competitors? It's by investing in our people. And it's investing time. We talk about ROI in our business as well, our return on investment. We look at the employee journey, we invest in technology, we invest on the rooms, we invest constantly in our product. And we have to do the same for our employees. We should be really now walking the talk. And now more than ever, listening, being empathetic, being compassionate, helps you make informed decisions and brings your people along with you at the same time.
That's a wonderful insight into how you do well, which is excellent. I'm sure that the attendees of the call are really valuing that. Let's hope everyone's thinking about how they can apply that day to day. Teresa, what would you say to that? What have been the benefits for you personally and for your business for adopting your compassionate leadership approach?
The benefit is it makes things easier. Even tough situations like we face it now, so much easier. When you have invested in building relationship with people, when your managers have invested time with them, delivering bad news or tackling issues, performance issues, behavior issues, it's so much easier when you have practiced this leadership style. You would have listened to your team. You would have learned from them what they value, what ticks them, what's important to them. You would have given feedback. It's that balance, between your needs and expectations, the department needs and expectations, the company needs and expectations. And when you have established the channels to make that clear from both ends, from the team member, the manager and the organization, makes it a lot easier than to have the tough conversations. You have already laid a path. So just for that reason, to make situations that can potentially be very stressful or even unpleasant, if they can make it easier, you're already winning a lot. And I think when you practice that, you transmit that there is a desire to help no matter what. It makes a person happy. It makes also you happy. And we know what happens when you have a team that are happy. The discretionary behavior changes. The desire to do better for everyone changes. It does end up in tangible results.
And what about from a day-to-day perspective? Because we've covered a lot of the theory, I guess, and some of the practice, some of the ways in which we can start to adopt this style if we're not already, or practice it. Can you give specific examples, or perhaps an example of how your approach in this sense has helped you deal with the situation?
Yeah,
I
have adopted the customer service model because we're so familiar with it at all levels, from team member to supervisor to managers. So I have adopted that model to deal with issues that happen at work. And I encourage the teams to apply the same principles. So in the same way that we listen to the guest feedback, we analyze it, we even have meetings at the back of feedback to understand what they're telling us or what's important for the guest, we will do the same with our team members and take the same approach. What can I do for you that can make you happy now? How can I influence how you feel it? That's what we would do with the customer. How can I influence your behavior, your performance? What have I got in my power? So if we start with that principle, I think it becomes a lot easier. A basic example, for instance, when an employee is regularly late. So we got options. If you start with the mindset, how am I going to help here? How am I going to influence that behavior? We will start asking, what makes you late? Is there any other start time that would be better for you? Is it possible? Is it important that you are on time? How does it affect the service of the team? How can I help? So all those questions come first. And then it's that dialogue. And eventually, we might establish between the team member and yourself that it is important, you have to be on time, the nature of this job requires that. And we're going to need you to commit to it. Then we'll take from there. If it doesn't improve, then you take the conversation again to the next level. The chances are it will improve, but you will then take the next step. So when we practice that, I have noticed we have gained a lot more. Then I used to have some managers that will straight away come with a lateness form. Time here, you late. You're not going to build any bridges. You're not going to influence. You'll have a record, and that record, could be important. You're not going to solve a situation. And I think this is a very basic example. When it comes to performance issues, somebody not achieving the target, same principle. What can I do? How can we help you? Why are these targets essential? And eventually, if it comes to the end of the journey, the conversation is, I really need to have a person who can achieve these targets because it is essential for the organization, for everyone that depends on this business to work. And again, it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but it does take a lot of the stress out. You feel much better because you dealt with it fairly. And I think many, many times the team member will surprise you. We'll have many examples when people have actually thanked us, even if we have to let them go. Thank you for trying to better myself is some feedback I have recently. And that is so, so powerful, so rewarding. And if you gain that, I think you already gain a lot.
What a great example, because lateness is something that probably everyone who's had team members has had to experience and deal with. I wonder how many times we've used a process rather than a personal approach to deal with that, and then gained an unfavourable outcome. So an excellent example there, Teresa, thank you. Stella, how about you? Can you give us any examples there from that you can cite where you have used this approach to good effect?
Yeah, sure. I think there are lots, but to draw on just one in particular now, which I think might resonate a lot with the industry during this difficult time. Back in 2013, we closed the Lanesborough Hotel. I was director of HR at the Lanesborough, and we closed for a refurbishment. And that meant 263 redundancies. Now, no easy task, and I can tell you that I have always adopted an empathetic and compassionate approach. And I think in hand with that as a leader, you have to always try to be as honest and transparent as you can be. You know, you're dealing with other adults, but they're facing change, much like we are today. Facing change can be very daunting. And I think change in our industry, change to personal circumstances, I mean, you do go through that change curve that, you know, HR Jo was talking about. You know, that change curve is really important. It's a journey that the employees go on. And I think applying empathy makes that difference, because what that means is that you go on that journey with them and you identify what their challenges will be and you try to focus on that. So when we closed the Lanesborough in particular, with my colleagues Anne Hunter and Karen Watson, actually, the three of us didn't just adopt the legalities. You know, we know there's collective consultations, we know there's a process to follow, but I think making it personal, because those are my values, and applying those to how you carry out tasks makes it very personal and appreciated from the employee perspective. And I think you really have to make time and invest to understand, because one person's circumstances is not another's, and that might influence how that journey looks for them. And you should be the one as a leader to be able to adapt to that. Remember one thing about leaders is that you end up being judged by your actions, not just your intentions. So sitting there and saying, you know, I have the intention to be a great leader, I listen a lot, I do this, and I care about my employees. You have to walk that talk. You know, you really have to make sure that all your actions and every process that you're doing that, you know. And I think that process, meeting everyone one by one, meant that I could leave them with a message that I hold true and dear today, which is you leave the building, you don't leave the people. And that is something in hospitality that makes me very proud, because when I think Jamira went through it quite recently as well, you know, when you're facing tough decisions, it's when we come together and you use your network. And as a leader, I think we go from listening to taking action. And giving clear direction is very important as well. And that's something, again, I'd just like to leave you with one more thing on that. Recently, I was also really inspired by a different sector. It was by Brian Chesky, CEO of Airbnb. And this was published, his speech was published. So if you haven't looked it up, please do, I encourage it. It was published in May 2020 because of the current situation. And what he actually did is, as CEO and co-founder, he had to make some tough decisions. He has announced the downsizing of his business. So this is worldwide. And he actually had the courage, the empathy, and real humility to be able to stand there and announce this himself. He didn't delegate this. And I think that's also a sign of a true leader. He really actually gave a message that said, you know what, I'm really sad to make this decision. I'm really sad to make this announcement, but this is how and why we have to do this. These are my principles. And he's listed his principles. And he said, throughout this whole journey, I've checked in with my principles and made sure I haven't compromised these. He addressed and spoke directly to the people he was letting go. He also then spoke to the people that were staying behind, who were going to stay and rebuild his company. And, you know, I think HR Jo touched on that. It's the people also staying behind that sometimes feel guilty of what's going on to their colleagues and in the industry around them. And I think that's really powerful. And I think we can learn a lot, again, just by looking up, learning, listening, speaking with colleagues and sharing. You know, being general manager and being a leader can be very lonely, you know, and I really think that if you share and you also have courageous conversations and real leadership, that is very powerful. And that's something that inspires me.
So, so intentions are one thing, actions are another. Stay close to your values and make those live through everything you do, and have a look at that Airbnb example as some good guidance. There have been some examples of that within our sector as well, but I think probably we all know that there are some other examples which are not so favourable, and inevitably. So it's about looking out for those beacons of of light, isn't it, to follow that example by. So that's a good watch out. Thank you. HR Jo, can we come to you, back to you? So you've had a lot of insight, I'm sure, talking about the good and the bad and the ugly of behaviour. So your work as an HR consultant, you've seen inside many businesses. Sort of, what would be your specific guidance to leaders at this time who perhaps, obviously those in our audience today, who understand the need for this approach, but really don't necessarily know how to go about starting to adopt it?
So we've already touched on values. I mean, values within the organisation, they're your DNA, they're your culture. So revisiting your values, reminding your employees who are remaining in your business about your values and how they can demonstrate their values and live their values on a daily basis. Our values should be linked to performance. This is how we measure performance within our organisation. So revisiting that with employees as well. And values help people, give people a sense of belonging as well. And we all know Maslow. We know that you need your love, safety, and belonging before you can get to that esteem and self-actualization. So values are key, a really good place to start. In many organisations that have had restructures, there's flatter structures now. People may be multi-skilled, they may have taken on new tasks. So it's really important to make sure that job descriptions aren't just a piece of paper, that people know exactly what is expected of them. We can't just assume that they know what their new job entails or what the changes are. We need to tell them and we need to show them. So, of course, training is key. I know managers and leaders are busy people, that have lots of, hats to put on, as we've already said. But by investing time now in training and retraining your teams, it's going to benefit your business in the long run. So there's a couple. Stella mentioned earlier about open and honest conversations. You've got to address the elephant in the room. If you've made redundancies, be open and honest about it. Talk to your teams about it. Tell them what's happened. Tell them what the plans are for the business in moving forward. You obviously can't, give them, reassurance that there won't be more changes, but you can certainly assure them that you're going to tell them if things aren't going to plan and if there are going to be other changes. Let people be able to ask questions. Let your teams be able to ask you questions that you can answer, so you can put their concerns to one side. Acknowledge feelings. We, shy away a bit from people's feelings, but we have to acknowledge them. People are going to be upset. Their friends have been made redundant. They might have been asked to take a pay cut. They might be on reduced hours. They might be upset about that. So as leaders, we need to acknowledge that, and we need to do that with empathy and compassion. Because if we don't, it's going to have a longer impact on the business. And Jo Umbrella has already mentioned emotional intelligence. Effective leaders have high emotional intelligence. It's how we manage our emotions, how we harness our emotions. So if you want to be an effective leader, do a bit of self-reflection. How do you manage your emotions? How do those emotions show up in your day-to-day leadership? How socially aware are you? Can you read the room? Can you see if someone's upset or not happy? How do you manage your relationships? If you want to do some reflection, maybe think of a situation that hasn't gone well in the past and think about how you'll address that in the future. Find someone in your organisation that has high emotional intelligence. Go and chat to them, get their advice, ask them how they do it, and adopt some of their theories. Find a mentor, find somebody that can give you that guidance. And also there's lots of different self-assessment tools out there that you can do to measure your levels of intelligence. So take some time to reflect about you as a leader, because that has such an impact on how your team thrives and how your team moves forward. You really need to be able to harness your emotions and think about the impact of what you say and how you say it and how that's going to be perceived by the team that you're communicating to. And just by doing that, that will have a massive impact on how you lead people.
Jo, I think everyone's synapses are firing off like nobody's business at the moment, thinking these are all amazing things that I can do. And you know what you're expressing there requires, I guess, an element of bravery, an element of stepping outside the process, an element of saying, I know this is the way people seem to do things around here, perhaps, but I want to try and start doing things slightly differently. So, so really, really useful insight there, Jo. Thank you. Let's come on to back to Umbrella. Jo, are you there with?
Yep.
I mean, what are the barriers then? You know, I probably touched on a couple of them there. Perhaps if you're surrounded by a lack of compassionate leadership, that might be one barrier. But what are the barriers to adopting this style? And you know, can you train it in? Is it something we can train ourselves and other people to do?
Well, let's start with the barriers first. You know what Jo, HR Jo was saying about an element of vulnerability that you have to have in order to be an empathetic leader. There's an element of actually recognizing that you can't have this hero status. You know, you can't be this leader that has a cape and everyone sort of follows you, but that's not what it's all about. It's actually working with your team and recognizing your limitations and starting with yourself. So I think the biggest barrier to adopting this leadership style is fear of being vulnerable and fear of being perceived as a soft leader. You know, the amount of times that, you know, people said, but I can't do that because it's going to look like I'm not tough enough, I'm not direct enough, you know, I need to do X, Y, Z. And everyone's calling for this tough leadership now that it's the tough times. Actually, in the toughest of the times, the empathetic leadership and that leadership that shows that you are human, that you do understand, that you are listening, even though you can't change the ultimate final decision, is what is needed. So the biggest barrier to us being not just successful as leaders, but to our organizations actually achieving success is actually the absence of trust to be able to be vulnerable as a leader. And as a result of that absence of trust that you can actually be yourself and be empathetic, then there is a fear of conflict. You don't go into conflict with someone, or you don't discuss things openly, which then leads to actually lack of commitment for the actual goals that we all have. And if there's lack of commitment for goals, we're going to have no accountability and there is no results. So what I'm trying to say here is that, you know, that barrier that stops individuals from being great leaders is a barrier that actually stops organizations from performing at its highest level, if that makes sense. So that's one of the barriers. Lack of understanding of the concept. You know, it's not something that you just, you know, you go and pick a situation. It's a daily routine. It's an exercise. It's a choice that you make to, you know, like a choice that you make to eat well or exercise. That's what authentic leadership, the compassionate, empathetic leadership is. And to the point, authentic leadership. And you're not going to get it right day in, day out. I can promise you that. But if you work on 7 out of 10, that's what I work on. If in 7 out of 10 situations I act as an empathetic, compassionate leader, I've done really well. Those 3, I'll work on really hard not to repeat. But that's the success. Being also really aware that there's other barriers, like, for example, looking at the organization and the organizational style that can be really challenging. If you're the only empathetic leader in the organization, it's quite a challenge. So my suggestion here is to consider empathetic leadership top down, because that will really make a difference in teaching others in the organization that this is a real value, real benefit for the organization, not just the individuals. These are some of the things that come to me, but one thing that is a real barrier that no one talks about is empathy leads to distress. Empathy is hard. Being an empathetic leader means that you go home and you haven't left what you heard at work. You know, if we are contextualizing this to today, some of you will be sitting in the rooms and listening, if you're genuinely empathetic leader, listening to people's stories. And some of those stories will be horrendous. The redundancies will mean that people are losing, you know, homes, livelihood, everything. And you can either do it in 10 minutes and go, finish, wash, done, let's do another 15 Zoom calls. Or you can sit there and listen. So the barrier to being an empathetic leader, that it's hard. It's a harder thing to do than using situational leadership or using transactional, transformational leadership. But the payoffs are huge, because what I'm hearing from Stella, people leave buildings, not people. And people leave buildings, but they also leave organizations forever. And we have an opportunity here to go, well, there is a time to come back. There is a time to rebuild. And this is the grounds that we're setting now to be able to rebuild. So lots of barriers, but also lots of opportunities. Now, someone said you can't delegate this. He didn't delegate. The Airbnb CEO didn't delegate. And one thing that you cannot delegate is your personal development. You can't give this to anyone else. Take charge of it. Can it be trained? Now, I've been management consultant, for years, and that's what I'm deep down inside. I do have the title of a chief operating officer, and run an apprenticeship organization from the operations and quality perspective. But deep down, my core is being a trainer. Can you train empathy? Absolutely not. However, if you have someone sitting there in that training room that is willing to learn, and if it's a two-way communication, and if you look at it from a development learning point of view, there is little chance in that actually you can inspire someone like today to start thinking this for themselves. This is the hardest. When someone says, can you train emotional intelligence or stress management? Those are two topics that I go, oh my God, it's going to be a hard day. Because I'm going to have a room full of people that want to listen and want to challenge themselves, or it's going to be a really hard day and no outcome in it if they are not ready to do that. So it is something that you can choose to learn yourself, and you can have people like us helping you with concepts. But can you train it? Can you do it to someone? Very difficult.
I agree, and I think that it's like a muscle that you have to, a bit like listening, you have to practice and practice and train up. And you made the point of it's like a healthy lifestyle or exercise. Well, it's pretty hard to adopt those habits, and sometimes it's tough and we don't want to, but the benefits are manifold, and I think we've really covered that today. So that's really really great, and I hope that everybody on the call and the session will be starting to understand that this sits within themselves, the power to be able to do this. It's not something that they have the chance to do or not. Everybody has the opportunity to flex those muscles. Okay, so there are quite a few questions coming through, and I'm keen to make sure that we answer them. But I do want to kind of round off the discussion, if you will, by giving the panel the opportunity to give their best tips. Now, a lot of tips and actions have already come out in the discussion, but if we can crystallize those, let's start with you, Stella. So what actions can everybody take today or tomorrow, or perhaps, seeing as it's Thursday, on Monday, having reflected on it, to start on this journey and bring their teams along with them?
Well, I wrote down a few that I thought of. The first one is plan ahead. So we know that life's going to throw things at us, as it has, and you can only prepare so much. But we know, as I've said before, that we look at our diaries and we invest time in revenue meetings and all sorts of other important meetings that we deem important. We call them big rocks. I'm kind of stealing that from Stephen Covey. So we plan our big rocks in there. Make sure, as from today, that you make a choice. And I think Umbrella Jo touched on this. These are choices. Okay, make a choice to plan time to invest in your people. So make a choice to actually say, right, that is my time to walk around my organization. That's the time where I might pick up the phone to employees on furlough. That is a time where I may actually touch with my other leaders and actually hear what's going on. And if you make that conscious choice, it becomes a habit. So you start today making a conscious choice, and before you know it, you're actually living it and you're doing it as a routine. And that's really important, because that will make a shift on yourself as a leader straight away. It will impact the organization, and it will also influence the people around you who see you doing this. So really, that's a win-win one. Umbrella Jo touched on mindset. Ask yourself from today, what kind of manager, what kind of leader do I want to be? What does that look like? Look in the mirror and actually say, if I were to carry out a 360 right now, gosh, what would everyone say about me? What would I say about myself? You know, we've all heard that. What legacy would I want to leave behind? And again, look up from your P&L, please. We have spent a lot of time looking at payroll costs, looking at the financial forecasting for the business. And whilst that's very important, or we won't have a business, look up, take a breath, look up around you, actually see what's going on, see the impact our decisions are making. It's really important that we do that. Also, relook at your brand, your company. Share that with your other leaders, you know, speak to your ex-com team, speak to your head of departments, speak to everyone and actually say, is now the time to give people hope as well? So we're talking about all these difficult conversations, but as a leader, what vision are we now giving employees? What goals have we given them? Yes, some are just surviving, but actually as a company, in order to now get back on track sooner rather than later and have a long-term success objective, revisit the vision together. Have little milestones that you can celebrate along the way and communicate those clearly, empathetically, of course, and at the right time. That's crucial, I think, to start from today. So those would be the quick wins that I would get out of this today.
Excellent, excellent advice. Teresa, let's come to you. What would be your suggestions for actions for our audience today?
A lot has been said already. I just would like maybe to reiterate also the importance of just be brave, have the courage. You're going to put yourself out there when you are prepared to listen and to offer help, or you committed to help and make a difference. So that is going to take some courage. So that's one point. For those ones that might be a little bit more shy, and that's the way they approach or not approach, the reason why they would not approach a situation is because they lack a little bit of confidence or they are shy. So have the courage to put yourself out there. And another thing, it's just watch your language. Use plain language when you're talking. Use plain language when you write. Before you click send, have you actually even put a greeting there? Is there a hi, how are you? Is there an ending saying something like, can I help with anything? So practice that kind of language that is more genuine and forget a little bit the more management lexicon that we use. Should you have a question? That kind of thing, just ditch that. I don't think we achieve anything. Just plain, how can I help you, will get you further, I think. And the other thing, it's also reiterate, create the habit and the mindset. You can help, you can influence, you can inspire others, so others can inspire you too. So think about how much you can learn from the person, how much you can learn from the situation. When you're doing your planning, you probably will become more genuine, you probably will become more accessible to everyone and more honest, and you probably have more to gain from the situation, from the person. So those would be my three ones.
Thank you, excellent. I love the idea of dropping corporate language. People seem to adopt it it's like a habit in itself, isn't it? It spreads. Everyone starts using the same corporate language. Perhaps if we start using empathetic language, that will spread too. That would be the outcome. Okay, so very quickly, because I'm really keen to get to the questions that everyone has taken the time to ask, but HR Jo, what are your tips? What are your top tips?
So I think communicate with kindness. I mean, that's really important. Not only will it help your team to thrive, but by carrying out acts of kindness, it releases the oxytocin hormone in your body. So it's going to help your health because it's going to reduce your blood pressure, lower your blood pressure. And, you know, to make a change, you have to come out of your comfort zone. If you're not out of your comfort zone, you need to challenge yourself and think, you know, how can I make myself a better leader? How can I come out of my comfort zone to make myself a better leader and better at what I do?
Fantastic. Who doesn't love a bit of oxytocin?
Yeah.
And finally, Umbrella Jo, what are your tips?
I think for me, apart from what everyone said, is don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Your stories and sharing your stories and experiences and how you're impacted is going to be as important for that two-way communication. Encourage actively disagreement. You know, if you see that someone is keeping quiet and their body language is off, but they're saying something, actively discourage that debate and a discussion, and not be afraid to have it. With people that you lead, give them that voice and ability to genuinely voice out what they think. And some of them don't have that voice. Some of them don't have that power, don't feel that they have power to do that. Actively encourage that power. For me also, be fully present. If you're choosing to do this, there is no halfway. You know, there is no doing your emails. There's no thinking about other things. Otherwise, there is no point in doing it. So be fully present when you're having these conversations. Don't interrupt. You know, let people tell you what they have to tell you. You know, put your ego in the bag for a second and think, do you know what? They need this moment, and it's okay for them to have that moment. Because that will really make a difference. Personally, as an empathetic leader, my biggest problem is I try to problem solve with people. So I try to give them solutions straight away because I want them to get out of whatever they're feeling, whatever is hurting. I suppose I go more down the compassionate leadership because I want to fix it. And sometimes you just need to hold back and not fix it for them because that's not what they need. So don't push your advice. Just be there to understand, listen, and collaborate. Otherwise, you're taking the power off the person that needs that power back. And my final, really, I think this is the biggest thing for me, and this is controversial. So I'll maybe not right thing to say on this webinar, but I don't believe that full empathy is completely possible. I believe that we're all very different. And we might have exactly the same situation, but the way we perceive it, the way we feel it, can be different because of our nationalities, upbringing, gender, so many different things, or just being Jo Simovic, you know, characteristics of personality. Understand your limits and understand that you might think that you know what the person is feeling, but understand that there might be other things that you're not understanding and respect that. So be humble about being an empathetic leader rather than think I'm so in tune with other people's feelings. So always have that little thought that they're different to you. I suppose that's for me. And don't wait for Monday. Don't wait for Monday because
Start now.
don't wait another day because this is, like you said, it's a muscle. Practice it day in, day out. And if you fall off the wagon, it's okay. 7 out of 10. And as long as you're doing that, it's you're coming back into that practice, and that's what we need to be doing. That would be my top tip.
Fantastic, really empowering stuff. Thank you so much to the panel. We've got we're just under half an hour to go within the time frame. I think it looks like we might use it. We've got a lot of questions, but let's see how we go. The first is, and anyone can elect to answer this, it's not directed at any one of you. How can we help big leaders, so that I guess the more senior leaders in our business, understand the real importance of empathy? And I mean the real empathy Jo was talking about, which is exactly what it is for me and what I'm trying to have every single day. So that's from Veronica. Who would like to take that one? How can we help?
Can I start with that one, if that's all right?
Yes, do.
I think the key with any concept that you want to bring to the senior leadership is to show the impact of it. As a management consultant, I spend my life believing in something and finding ways to actually prove that it's financially viable to a point. So it's about understanding concepts like this and then going, well, let me show you the impact of doing it this way, and let me show you the impact of how that looks on the P&L that we talked about, how that looks like on the retention recruitment strategies. So it's taking little pilot studies, it's taking little situations that you have in the business, implementing it yourself, and then going back and inspiring that senior leader to see it as a positive. It's also looking at concepts and projects that you have and implementing empathetic leadership as part of those concepts. So, for example, change management, suggest thorough consultation, suggest genuine collaboration, create space for that to happen, and then compare that to the previous change strategies and say, look, people are on board. They weren't happy with this change, but they're on board because we brought them on board with us. So by showing impact of that leadership, you will get them on board. And I think that's really important, because as a concept, yeah, it looks a little bit fluffy, it looks a little bit out there. But once you start getting bogged down into return on the investment and you influencing that change in mindset that it matters to the business, not just people, it matters to the business. That's how you get the senior leaders on board.
Excellent. Always with the data, always with the proof points, as well as the human elements. Okay, thank you. Here's a question here for Stella. I think it could equally apply to Teresa, so we might ask you both to give a viewpoint on this. Within your hotel, what are the plans for redeveloping overall team ethic when staff start to return from furlough, as of course this has become such a personal decision for everyone? Stella, do you want to start with your thoughts on that one?
Sorry, let me just understand the question. So what is the plans for
within your hotel? Yeah, within your hotel, what are your plans for redeveloping overall team ethic? I guess this is about the new morale and the new ethos of the team when staff come to return from furlough.
Okay, I think, again, going back to being open, honest and transparent, I think it's important that we treat our employees as adults. Ultimately they are stakeholders in our business and deserve to understand the direction of the company and what they're coming back into work to. We have a massive change going on, and we can't hide behind that. It isn't business as usual. And I think it's really important first to engage in conversations, maybe before they even come back. So, letting your employees not be daunted by walking through the door on first day. It shouldn't feel like first day at school, what's going to happen. They should already have an understanding, and they should already be on board with our culture and know that our culture and our ethics and what our brand stands for and who we are as leaders. We're ready here to welcome them back. We cannot wait to welcome our people back. But we have to understand, as we've said before, that these ethics and that the culture is very much still alive and well, that employees have a real understanding and can trust the organization, can trust the leaders, that they're coming back into the so I think it's really important that big journey begins before they even come in the door. I think it's really important. I think HR Jo mentioned the employee return to work questionnaires, that you really address concerns, that you answer questions before they arrive, before they come back to the workplace. Those are really important to address. And I think it's important that you spend a lot of time with your leadership as well, to make sure that they are empowered and they have the tools and the ability to be empathetic leaders and have that approach. So it's not necessarily that you're going to change the culture, but you're going to reinforce it. You're going to re-emphasize it. And you're going to revisit those values and make sure that they're alive and well in practice. And you revisit that employee journey, and that the employee can already have a vision of what that employee journey will look like and can see the touch points of those values throughout that journey. So I think it's important to have clear communication and clear guidelines so that expectations are realistic and they're met on both sides.
Excellent answer. And Teresa, how about you? Anything to add there that you're doing within your establishment?
We have actually welcomed back a small group already, and we did that on Monday. So we thought that the only way really was to actually have an induction, like when we welcome our new starters, because it is important that we say clearly what's different, what's the sign. We evaluated the values. Are they still fit for purpose? Are they COVID proof, if you like? We started a session on the day actually asking people, put in a post-it note and park it confidentially somewhere in the corner of the room, what's bothering you, right now. You have braved yourself to come to work, many of them on public transport, many of them the first time on public transport since March. Some of them have come back on part-time, uncertain times. So I wanted to know what's bothering you. Confidentially, put it out there. We will try to help with possible solutions. And then at the end of the session, obviously we cover the health and safety, all these hard measures that we need to put in place, one-way system, and so on. At the end of the day, there was another session, building the future. So what did we do before that you want us to continue that works? What things are okay, but we need to improve, we don't do it well enough, and what things need to die a sudden death? We don't want to see that ever again. What practices, what is not right anymore? And we did that with post-it notes, confidential, put on a wall, and as we welcome the rest of the team, we'll ask the same questions, and then we'll take stock. We will have a look. There are themes. Is there any ideas, any initiatives? And it will help us build our people strategies moving forward. And I think it's important that we're transparent. I think it's important that we listen and that we hear from the team. We have a lot to learn from the team. It is incredible how much more than us, the leaders, know sometimes. And that it's how we're going about it. As we move along, we'll evaluate if it's right, if it's relevant, and we will keep evolving. What this situation has taught us is nobody knows the answers. We've all been learning at the same time. And it will be important to say, yeah, we didn't get it right. What else can we do? Or understand that we are evolving as we go along. It's not anything like before. Your year plan, 5-year plan, whatever we did before, I don't think applies this year, 2020, and I don't think it will apply even next year, 2021. So sending the message clear to them, I think it's important.
Excellent. The power of the post-it note as a listening tool when people don't want to speak. You know, who knew that whoever invented the post-it note, it would help empathetic leadership. But of course it does. You know, sometimes it's easier to write what you don't like down on a post-it note and scuffle away from it, and then you'll be encouraged to talk about it a bit later. Excellent. Okay. Another question here. I'm just looking at the time. We've got about 15 minutes left maximum. This is for Umbrella Joe and HR Joe, so the two Joes. Can you give some more details on how to develop and implement emotional intelligence? This is quite a big question, I think. I'm 23 years old and I'm building my way up to be a manager. I'm a highly empathetic individual, but how do you ensure with emotional intelligence that there is the correct balance here? That's from Ellie. I guess maybe, you know, is that, am I too empathetic? Is that what I'm hearing from that question? I don't know, but how do we develop and implement emotional intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it's hard because, you know, you have that fine balance between being a pushover as a manager and being emotionally intelligent and being able to, you know, respond to employees and listen to employees and help employees. So, you know, I think to improve emotional intelligence, it's about, as I said earlier, all about your sort of self-awareness and looking at how you can improve your self-awareness. So some people find it really easy. You know, I think Stella said earlier, it's like holding a mirror to your face, and some people will look and, you know, they'll say, oh, you know, that's not quite right. I need to change this. I need to change that. And other people will find it harder to do that. So it's about the tools and the support that you have around you within your organisations to help people be more self-aware, and also picking up on situations that happen. You know, when we're under pressure, you know, sometimes we're not very emotionally intelligent in the way we respond to things. You know, if that has happened, you know, we might be in the middle of a busy service. It's not just leaving that. It's about addressing that afterwards and sitting down and talking with that individual so that they can learn from that. And and making sure that, you know, if someone interacts with you and they've upset you, or you don't like, you know, they've been too direct, or you don't understand what it is that they're asking you, make sure that you tell them, because they might not have a clue that, you know, they've spoken to you in that way and it's impacted negatively on you. Don't let that become your baggage. That's their baggage, not your baggage.
It's a really good question. It's a brilliant question that was asked here, because there is an article written by a University of Yale professor called Paul Bloom that talks about empathy being something that can actually hamper diversity and hamper and encourage bias, because in essence, you know, there is a discussion that you could be so empathetic that you're making the decisions that are not right for the overall picture, and you're not really listening to the data. And I completely disagree with it, but it's a really good point to ask, is it? And how do you manage that? How empathy becomes something that is really relevant? Now, for sorry, what was the name of the lady that asked this question? Ellie.
Ellie.
For Ellie, this is a brilliant start. You already started on your journey to being more emotionally intelligent, because the start of emotional intelligence is self-awareness, you know, and it's actually looking through how aware you are of other elements of emotional intelligence. And then if you look at, you know, how empathetic I am, well, that's just one part. But let's talk about, for example, the ability to have great social skills. That's another element of emotional intelligence. Another one that is really important is, for example, how you manage your own emotions. And this is not just to people who are quite, you know, passionate and loud and a little bit over the top like myself, that sometimes my emotions come out and I'm like, well, this is how you do it. You know, it's also about people who manage their emotions but keeping very quiet and not responding. So emotional intelligence is a spectrum. Empathy is a spectrum, and I don't think that you can have too much of it. It's just how you use it. Another element of emotional intelligence that we can talk about is self-motivation. Well, it sounds to me that Ellie is super self-motivated. So that you already have an element that is there. The best way to learn about it is to actually go and assess yourself. And there's so many tools that you could use to go, how good am I at this? But also use other people. So give them the same tool. And I'll share with Kathy that we can actually share after the webinar some of the self-assessment tools. You know, do a 360 that Stella was talking about, and ask a person that manages you, ask your partner. You should see the scores that I got from my wife when I asked her how empathetic I am. So, you know, ask people around you to assess you and see where you need to be better at, but also, you know, recognize that it's not just about developing your areas for development and your weaknesses. It's also about strengthening your strengths. It's a concept that Peter Honey brings beautifully. If you're really tall, you're going to go, well, I'm not going to play basketball. I'm actually going to go and play rugby. That might be a good thing. But in essence, you have predisposition to be something really good in basketball because of your height. In management, we don't think I'm really good at empathy. Let me strengthen that. No, we go, I'm really bad at managing my emotions. So I'm going to go and work on that. Strengthen your strengths, but also we could work on the areas for development, and you will definitely see a difference in how you are as a leader in the terms of emotional intelligence. Daniel Goleman rocks. So anything by Daniel Goleman might help you to actually see this in a real clear light, and start self-assessing on that area.
That'd be great if you could share those tools. In fact, there was a question to both Joes, if you could share some of the self-assessment tools that you might use for emotional intelligence. So that was from Annabelle, so we'll definitely follow up with that. Okay, so here's a question which I'm nervous to ask, but I'm going to do it anyway because Kieran's asked it. What is your thoughts on Kim Scott's theory of ruinous empathy and how it can negatively impact the team and the business? Is anyone aware of Kim Scott's theory of ruinous empathy, or might have an idea of what that means and can answer that question? Because if not, we can come back to Kieran.
Umbrella knows every theory going, so.
Sorry, what happened to me is it cut off for me when you started saying the theory, and I was like, what? Which one? What's happening? So
okay, I'll Okay, what are your thoughts on Kim Scott's theory of ruinous empathy and how it can negatively impact the team and the business?
That was the concept I was bringing earlier on about the fact that empathy can go, that in essence it can be taking on too much of people's personal feelings and looking at that empathy bias. So there has been I think it's a valid thing to consider. Let's start with the question. My thoughts are that it's a valid concept to consider that empathy can be something that people take too far. Okay, that's the element of people being called too soft as leaders, because ultimately, and this is where the difference between empathetic and compassionate leaders come into place, because apparently compassionate leaders are meant to take that action and fix things for people. Yeah, and that action should be for the good of all. So compassionate leadership, very easy to do in NHS. I've trained it there. It's very easy. You get all the questions, you get all the answers. Come to hospitality in 2020 in July. What's best for one person is very different for another person. What's best for one department, very different for another department. So to go back to this concept, empathy bias, you make a decision based on your feelings about this particular situation rather than all the information. Okay, another thing that can be really tricky in that concept is also distorted judgment as a result of empathy. So that's what Kim Scott is highlighting, that empathy can actually distort the rational thinking and logical thinking, because you're considering everyone's position. But where I think that we need to come back is, as long as there is a shared understanding, and it's not just understanding of feelings, it's understanding of situations, positions, thoughts, facts, and we create a shared understanding, we can then move forward. But it's a valid theory to consider, to actually go, well, yes, you can't be too empathetic, but you can take empathy far enough from the logical reasoning and business decision making. And that's where we need to draw the line. And that's where, Jo, the management consultant, sits versus Jo, the leader in a setting, sits. That makes sense.
I think it does. And in simple terms, I guess if it's a muscle that needs to be flexed, it's a bit like training. Sometimes you go too far and you feel it. Other time you don't do enough and you feel it.
That's a brilliant analogy. I love that.
I don't speak from any kind of experience, of course, in terms of training, but in fitness training anyway. Okay, so we're coming to a close, but there's one little question I wanted to ask because it's come up here again from Ellie, actually. What do you all think about Rishi Sunak's plans for apprenticeships in the hospitality industry, and could these be a helpful assistance to empathetic leadership? This is not really you've asked in the last 5 minutes, but nonetheless, is this a positive tool for us to use, or is it not going to really help you in terms of empathy?
Can I answer? Apprenticeships are very close to my heart. I'm going to try and be an empathetic, authentic leader, and actually share with you a story from yesterday. I heard the announcement and I got so emotional, it was ridiculous. And I didn't know that I was holding the breath until that came through, because I heard about the VAT and I was like, and I was like, oh my God, this means so much. We can debate how much it means. We can debate a lot of things. Could it be more? Could it be less? The second announcement came and I was like, well, this is good for jobs. And then the skills agenda came on play and I got really emotional, because that skills agenda is not just a skills agenda for today. It's a skills agenda for 18 months, 24 months, 5 years to come, if we can stick with that particular skills agenda. It means so much. It means that some of the businesses can not only recruit the right kind of people, and when I say the right kind of people, it's any person that is career orientated and wants a career in hospitality, but it means that we can retain people in the industry, that really want to develop, and we can retrain people. So we could have, I don't know, head housekeepers that are losing jobs going, do you know what, I can be an ops manager and I'm going to apply for that position, and there is no funding for organizations, not only to train them through the apprenticeship schemes, but to actually get additional funding to start that employment. I cannot stress enough the importance of the Kickstarter scheme. I mean, we will have an opportunity as hospitality for 6 months to bring people into hospitality and show them this wonderful world and train them, and the businesses will not have to, you know, spend their own budgets that they don't have. We have just been given a budget. You know, every hospitality business has just been given a budget that they can strategically invest into their positioning for the future. And I cannot stress the importance of being strategic about this, of using and utilizing every penny that we have been given for the future, not for tomorrow, not for the recovery of from the coronavirus and COVID-19 lockdown, but for the future. This is what we needed, and I'm super excited about it. Sorry, that was
well,
a bit
I don't
much.
know if we should.
Too much vulnerability.
No, you know what? To end with passion and positivity is always a very good thing. Okay, so thank you so much to all our panelists for their time today. Just incredible amounts of experience there that everyone on the session can absorb and move on from. Take the actions today, plan the time for it, be brave, have the courage, practice. I hope that we'll see the results of this day to day as the months go on and into the future as we practice compassionate and empathetic leadership. So thank you very much. We're going to end the session now, and there are a couple of questions still unanswered, so we will come to you panelists afterwards to answer those personally for those that submitted them, but I'll just leave you with the thanks and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great
Bye-bye.
afternoon. Bye.
Bye. Bye.